All right, so we are doing this. Hello, everyone. My name is Blue Drake, and I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to want to upload videos to this channel. I talked about the idea of uploading all of my podcasts, my talk shows, whatever everybody wants to call them, to this channel in a previous video that I had made that I had uploaded to my main channel. And I didn't really think that that many people would even be interested in that concept. And I'd only mentioned it in passing in my previous video. So I was rather surprised when I noticed a relatively large number of people follow me over to this channel, presumably because they are interested in exactly that, listening to the podcasts and the talk shows that I'm making. So if you are one of those people, let me know in the comments below. I actually am very curious to hear from you all. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other questions about, like what I'm planning on uploading to this channel, potentially questions even about my other projects and beyond. And I don't really want to talk about that in this video for two reasons. The first reason that I'm still figuring out a lot of those things myself, uh, still. And the second reason is there's a lot of things that are out of my control that I'm kind of waiting on, um, before I actually entirely know how I'm going to want to do all the things that I want to do. But I am interested in making that video talking about those things when the time is right. Um, but specifically for this video, there's something else entirely that I have been wanting to talk about for months, and it hasn't been as burning a desire to talk about as much as it was to talk about the previous topic I made on my main channel, for that entire conversation, for that entire topic. But it's still something that has been fascinating me, and the more that I've been learning about it, and the more I've been following about it, the more that I've been getting obsessed with this. Specifically, one of the biggest reasons why I've been getting obsessed with this is because it is specifically related to my previous video. It is specifically a sign, possibly one of the first signs, one of the first consequences of what is happening in the industry because of the effects of the things that I talked about in my previous video, because of the market changing, because of innovation stagnating, because of the way people consume games inevitably changing. I have been following a select number of titles, a few titles that are probably some of the first in a whole new genre that I don't think people even realize is a new emerging genre yet, that are being specifically built to experiment with solutions to all of those problems I had mentioned previously. So with that out of the way, um, I want to cut straight to the chase. Hopefully, I've given you kind of like a nice, good, broad, vague overview of my thoughts and this idea, this concept I'm being obsessed with. And you're sitting here watching Fallout 76 footage, so you're probably like, "What? Okay, so what is it, Blue Drake? Tell me." So I'm going. Let's dive into this. Um, Many of you are probably aware of the new game Fallout 76. It's a new Fallout game, and it is multiplayer, which obviously means it is going to be. I mean, that's a significant progression in the Fallout series. This is the first multiplayer Fallout game uh, to date that is actually in the Fallout 4, Fallout 3 family engine, which by itself makes it profound. And I want you to throw all of that out the window. All of your hype, all of your conceptualizations of this being the first multiplayer game of a Fallout universe in the series. I want you to throw out all of that because it's completely irrelevant. Because I want to propose the idea that this is considerably more than just a new Fallout game. Um, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that say, well, what do you mean by that? I don't mean like, oh, this is considerably more than a new Fallout game because it's going to revolutionize the Fallout universe or the Fallout brand or Bethesda or anything like that. I think that Fallout 76 is, I want to say potentially much bigger than that, but I don't think it's even potentially. I think Fallout 76 is considerably bigger than that. I think that this is bigger than Fallout. I think this is bigger than Bethesda. I think Fallout 76 is the third game in a series of 3 games that has been put forward by the industry that is specifically built to experiment with solutions to all of the problems I have mentioned in my previous video that the smartest and brightest in the industry know is coming. And nobody realizes that that is what this is, and that is what these companies are doing. And I haven't decided exactly how they're related yet. I don't necessarily think that they're even all created by the same person. It could be studios experimenting with similar ideas and then, taking those ideas from other studios that they see experimenting with the same ideas and learning from that and then improving on it. It could be something like that that is evolving entirely naturally. But the correlations are just so undeniable at this point that I can't help but think about it. So let me lay this out. Let me just kind of say the big prediction, the big claim. I think that Fallout 76 is the third game in a whole new genre, a whole new evolving genre. I know I've already said this once before. And I think that it is the third game, and the second game was Sea of Thieves, and the first game was No Man's Sky. I'm going to give you a second to kind of like digest that information because I'm sure the first reaction is, Blue Drake, what the hell are you talking about? How are those even remotely related? They're completely different games that cover completely different material. And that's what we're going to get into because I think that this is a connection that nobody else is making. And I think that this is indicative of a massive movement in the industry that could potentially take off big time. And it's interesting because it's being met by a lot of confusion and frustration from the consumer market because nobody really understands or sees what is actually going on. And a lot of people are kind of misinterpreting what these studios are doing as different things, either laziness or maybe not caring about the fan base or greed or something like that, that they're misunderstanding all of those elements because they're not seeing what is actually happening. And the studios themselves aren't talking about it at all either because they have absolutely no incentive to. In fact, if anything, I think they are actively trying to keep this idea and these plans quiet so that nobody else copies them for as long as possible because I think they're onto something. I think they know that they're onto something. And I think that they know that they're onto something so much that even when they get a lot of backlash, the payoff of even experimenting with this is so great that they're not even explaining that this is what they're doing. And I'm going to lay this all out for you right now. So let me tell you this. In my previous video, in fact, I'm just going to stop this. In my previous video, I talked about some of the inevitable changes that I foresee coming in the industry. Changes in how games are consumed. Uh, changes and not just changes, but also looking back in history at what made good games in the past and talking about innovation and how we're currently hitting a wall in some of that innovation and technological innovation. And also drawing some comparisons to the music industry and how the music industry drastically changed, not just in the way that it creates content, but in the way that it monetizes content. And that's what we're talking about here. I think, and God, I cannot stress to you how important I think this is. I think Fallout 76, uh, Sea of Thieves, and No Man's Sky is a completely new breed of game. A completely new breed. Absolutely new from the ground up that is purpose built intentionally to combat some of the problems that I mentioned previously. And the fact that Bethesda is actually doing this, the more that I think about it, the fact that Bethesda is doing this at all, the fact that Bethesda has been swept up into this makes me think that a lot of the things that I had mentioned previously are not only true, but are happening much faster and are much more wide sweeping than I even ever previously thought. Because if somebody like Bethesda is getting scared enough or paranoid enough or is maybe even forward thinking enough, maybe it's not even scared or like I think that these guys are on top of the game right now. But if they're doing, no matter how you slice it, if they're doing this at all, if Bethesda, one of the biggest heavy hitters in the industry, is doing this and putting obviously this many resources into this concept, then that means that this is potentially happening not just faster but bigger than I ever even thought. And let me tell you, I'm sorry that I'm kind of dragging this out. Let me tell you what this is. Okay, so like I said, this is a whole new breed of game in a series of so far 3 games. 3 games that I think were all games that were basically all chips on the table, specifically for probing the industry and probing the consumer market for this new idea. One second, I have to cough for a second. I've been talking so much tonight. And here is what that idea is. Obviously, I had talked in my previous video about how technical innovation in order to save games, in order to sell games, is quickly becoming no longer viable. If you want to sell a game, you're not going to be able to sell a game uh, for $40 and say, oh, well, buy it because it looks prettier, buy it because there's more players, buy it because there's bigger maps. We're hitting a point where that's not really having that big of an impact anymore because every single game has all of those features. They're all pretty. They all have lots of players. They all have big maps. They all have all of this. And even innovating that further isn't really having that big of an impact. Like, for instance, there's some games that have a whole universe of worlds. But it doesn't matter because if those worlds are empty and unfeeling, then it doesn't matter. You can have a 4-kilometer map or a 32-kilometer map, but the impact that that has on the actual consumer experience is considerably less than having like a not even a kilometer map versus a 4-kilometer map. Like innovating that and pushing the bar technologically in that direction is becoming less and less commercially viable because the consumers don't care as much. They don't care about the difference between having one world and a billion worlds. They barely have enough time to explore and experience, like 3 square kilometers. So we're hitting a wall there. And um, I also brought up that in order to retain customers, the industry is going to have to, well, I didn't even say it's going to have to because it's already doing this in a lot of ways, but it's getting to the point where story, culture, original intellectual property is going to be what keeps audiences engaged. And this Fallout 76, Sea of Thieves, No Man's Sky is actually a whole new approach to all of this that I never thought of before and is also genius. It's actually genius. I didn't even think of it, and now that I realize what they're doing, it's fucking it's it's genius. It's genius. And I think it's so genius that they have attempted it multiple times and even had those previous video games in the series fail, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the experimentation is still so worth it. And I actually think they are going to get there. Somebody is going to nail this eventually. And when somebody does nail this, it's going to be. I actually think that this could become the new standard. In the same way that PUBG and Battle Royale blew up, this could become the new standard. Fallout 76, Sea of Thieves, and No Man's Sky all have one thing in common. And that's that I believe, because Fallout 76 isn't out yet, but I'm making this prediction, they are all episodic. They are all, especially Sea of Thieves. And I think Fallout 76 is going to be even more so. No Man's Sky is actually a mystery to me, or at least it was, because I was a big fan of No Man's Sky. I was incredibly excited for No Man's Sky, and when it came out, it was obviously incredibly controversial. And I still like the game, and a lot of people were trying to say that I'm a liar and like, oh, you don't like the game, you're just trying to save face. But that's not true. I actually did like the game, but one of the things that I liked about it, and well, I don't want to say one of the things that I liked about it. One of the things about No Man's Sky that I didn't understand was why it was the way that it was. Because the way that No Man's Sky was didn't make any sense. And I know that sounds kind of vague, so let me get into that deeper, because it was met with a lot of backlash. People said a lot of things. They said the developers were greedy. They said that they were lazy. They said that they didn't understand their audience. They said all of these things. And the thing is I don't think they were any of those things. Which was why it was so mysterious to me. Which is why it didn't make any sense. Because when a game like this comes out, and it meets that much controversy, you would think that one of those things would be true. You'd think that, oh, okay, these developers are just greedy, these developers are just stupid or lazy. But the problem is if any of those things were true, this game would have been completely different. Because look at this screenshot right here. Look at this. No Man's Sky is beautiful. No Man's Sky was polished. No Man's Sky was a high quality, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with this, but just hear me out. No Man's Sky, even when it first released, was a polished, aesthetic, packaged experience that was high quality. And it was also incredibly shallow. It was incredibly shallow. Shallow to the point that it was crippling. The game was incredible on every single element except for the game design. The game design was so laughably and obviously shallow that a lot of people were mad. But to me, I wasn't mad. It just didn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense because they're obviously, the problem with this is they were obviously capable of so many things. They can make a beautiful UI. They can make beautiful planets. They can make, I mean, even the ships, there weren't even that many bugs in the experience compared to other games. Compared to other games that have come out, indie games, even AAA games that have massive issues that make them nearly unplayable, No Man's Sky was only shallow. Which for a game development team that is able to accomplish all of this, the fact that they would be unaware that that was going to be a problem and also unaware of how to fix it is so unlikely. Like being able to accomplish all of this and playing the game and not realizing that that is a problem that needs to be fixed is so unlikely to me that it was nearly, if not impossible. It didn't make any sense to me until now. Until now. Because if you play No Man's Sky now, well, it's a completely different experience. It is a completely different experience, 100%. Entirely different game, entirely different concept, entirely different play, everything. And it still has a long way to go. And I guarantee you it's going to continue going there. That's actually kind of what I'm getting towards. But it is fundamentally a completely different game now than when it first launched. And here's the first nugget of information that I think is going to lead you towards what I am finally realizing. I think that was all on purpose from the beginning. Because if you think about it, if No Man's Sky had come out on day one and they had just dropped it and nobody had paid attention to, and people would have played it and then they would have left forever. But now that it's a completely different game and that it has completely different content, and also because it was so controversial and having the way the game it is now, I actually think that if they had released the game as it is now first, I actually think it would have been in the long term less successful, because now it's actually an underdog story. Not only are people committed over long term, have they been following these monthly updates, this content, this growth of this game that they can see and be a part of, but they're also, now that the game has reached this level of playability with multiplayer and everything, it has this underdog story to it that has engaged people considerably more than I think they would have even been engaged if the game had been like perfect, quote unquote, when it had dropped. And I actually think that No Man's Sky is the first in a series of games, because I'm going to go on to see it. Exhibit B is going to be Sea of Thieves. This is Exhibit A. And I think here is my theory. I think that No Man's Sky was a concept. No Man's Sky was a concept of, what if we released a game that was a canvas? Because nowadays, the idea of selling a game once and not touching that game ever again is almost impossible. Selling a $60 game and being like, oh, okay, here's a $60 game and we're gone, is basically impossible. You have to support that game over time in order to continue keeping that audience engaged. But even that is actually reaching a breaking point. Because when you look at games like, I don't want to go into this too much because, again, controversy. I'd like to keep this private if I ever talk about these games in too much detail. But when you look at games like Squad, when you look at games even like, I don't know, Ghost Recon Wildlands or other things, those games offer a very specific experience. It's 100 players with combined arms combat. It's third-person tactical gameplay. It's people play those games primarily for the technological aspects of it, not as much for the storyline aspects of it. There might be a couple of people that play Ghost Recon Wildlands for the story, but if there are, I'm not one of them. But with the impending changes to how games are consumed, the impending changes of how games are made and what makes people want to play games, I think that that is not going to be viable anymore. If another game identical to Squad comes out tomorrow, actually, let me put it this way: if another game identical to Squad comes out tomorrow that is free I think that would have a disastrous impact on their player base to the point where they wouldn't recover. Because there's no reason to play Squad then. Squad doesn't have any narrative, doesn't have any original IP. It doesn't have any other reason other than technological reasons to play it. If there's an alternative that is cheaper, that is just as good, people will switch to that because it's not cultural. There's no cultural integration. Um, but obviously, as I have said in the past, I think that the answer to retaining consumers is that cultural integration. And that's where we go to Sea of Thieves. So let's take a look at Sea of Thieves. Now, Sea of Thieves is the next experiment in this series of three. These are all three games that are all the same genre, in my opinion. These are all experiments that the industry is making on how to change how they're making content in order to survive, in order to create perpetual experiences. And No Man's Sky, in my opinion, was a big experiment that obviously met a lot of controversy and debatably flopped. I don't actually think it did flop. I think it actually survived. But I don't think any of that matters because it was a experiment. No Man's Sky was an experiment. It was an experiment that all of the big companies wanted to see. And it wasn't, the companies didn't want to see, oh, you know, how is a space game going to do? The companies wanted to see, how is a game, even a single player or co op game or something like that, with unique original content going to survive if it is based on evolving content. So when you look at Rare, when you look at Sea of Thieves is very similar to No Man's Sky. When it first came out, there was almost nothing here, and I actually think Sea of Thieves is going to be a flop. Um, I think well, I guess that's debatable. I think there will be more things of the same exact genre of Sea of Thieves that will be more successful. I think Sea of Thieves actually could have been more successful, but the studio, uh, Microsoft, wasn't as willing to take the full leap into this concept that I'm seeing emerging, and they actually stunted it right at the end. So they're only committing halfway to this whole new idea. And Sea of Thieves launched as a $30, $60 game, whatever. Uh, that was basically bare bones. There was very little to do. There was very little gameplay. And a lot of people gave it flack for that. But here's the kicker. And hopefully this is going to be the beginning of you understanding what I'm talking about. I am starting to believe that that was on purpose. It was intentional. It was very specifically intentional. And I'm not talking about intentional because, you know, people are greedy or because, oh yeah, we wanted to release a bare bones game and then take everybody's money. No, I think that that is a core feature to the formula that these games are trying to follow, that these games are trying to pioneer. And that formula is, what if we released a game that is bare bones, that has some cool core mechanics, but is for the most part bare bones? Because we have this problem, right? We have this problem where we release a game and people buy that game and then they never really either play it again or they buy another game that's exactly like our game, and they never try to buy another game, or it just kind of stunts the entire experience. You pay $30 and you say, okay, that's it, bye. You've gotten your game, and that's the end of that life cycle. Because if another game that comes out that's exactly the same, you're not really going to buy it. It almost competes against itself. But what if we did this? What if we rarefied experiences? Because that's the problem right now. right? I mean, people can buy a video game once and they have the entire thing, and then they can just leave. They they do the equivalent of going to GameStop and they purchase the game from GameStop. They're like, all right, I got my game. They go home and they never talk to you again. But what if you could get them to come back all the time? What if you made it? What if you made it so when they buy the game, they don't get the full game? And it's not like you're cutting up the game into DLC or anything. Like that's too obvious. That's too obvious. Like they'd see that. They'd be like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to buy DLC." But there's another form of value. There's another way to make an experience that you can't get all of unless you invest in. I know this is so hard to explain. I hope you guys are following me right now. But the other way that you can rarify something is with time. Time limits. Almost like a TV show. Almost like and you see a lot of other games doing this as well. They're experimenting. When you look at Fortnite, even though Fortnite is a battle royale competitive game, you look at Fortnite and what has Fortnite been doing recently? Fortnite has been implementing elements into its game that are fleeting, that are temporary, that change. You want to play Fortnite right now because some of the things that are there may not be there next week. You want to play Fortnite now because it's a cultural integration that is evolving. That if you come and play 2 months later, it's not going to just be like the same experience. It's going to be a completely different experience, possibly even a completely different game. And I think that people are starting to realize that with the changes that are inevitably happening with the industry, that could very likely be the new market. When you look at things like TV shows, why do people stick around for TV shows? It's because they want to know what happens next. They want to be there. They want to be in the moment. And they can't get that. That's also why TV shows are able to capitalize on all sorts of things. Like, why are you going to go watch Game of Thrones and see all of the ads or do pay-per-view or whatever the hell they force you to do to see Game of Thrones when it releases instead of just, buying it on DVD when it comes out later? Because you want to be in that moment. You want to go to work the next day and be able to participate in all of the conversations about Game of Thrones. It's cultural. Do you see that it is cultural? It's cultural integration. And that's what they're selling. And I think that Sea of Thieves is the second in a series of two, now a series of three with Fallout 76, that is capitalizing on that. When you play a Sea of Thieves, you'll notice, in fact, let's take a look at this. You can see it with their Twitter. Sea of Thieves Twitter. Show me the damn Twitter. Here it is. But if you look at the way Sea of Thieves is structured, they are not doing DLC. It's not like, oh, hey guys, we just added this new thing, and now you have this new thing forever. That's not what's happening. The way Sea of Thieves is working is they're doing, hey, we're doing this new thing, but it's only up for 3 weeks. You notice, look, Sea of Thieves, Forsaken Shores, etc., etc. There's all of these dailies. There's all of these short-term things that it's not like, oh, hey, I paid $30 and it's early access and they're going to finish the game eventually. It's, I paid $30 to get access to this show. Because there, and in fact, it's almost completely different than a TV show because it's more exhaustible than that. It's not like, oh, okay, I'll just wait until the DLC comes down in price. It's, if you don't get on and play this now, it's gone forever. If you don't get on and experience this time-limited content now, it's gone forever. And obviously, they mix that with a variety of other content. You'll have stuff that comes out, new ships, new items, new things that are permanent. Things that are permanent. But the bulk of the game, the biggest reasons to play the game, are things that are fleeting. And that is a hole a whole new. In fact, let me see. Sea of Thieves. What is it? DLC? I don't even know. What do they even call it? I don't even know what this is called yet. There needs to be a new name for this. Like events? Possibly? Is that what it's called? I have no idea. Let's see. Forsaken. Let's just do Forsaken Shores. Maybe that'll take us to somewhere. I want to go. Here we go. Forsaken Shores. I wish. Is there a list of everything that has happened so far? I wish I could see it. But if you notice, these are time limited. Look at this. What's happening when? Week 1. Discover and explore the Devil's Roars, taking on risky voyages that reward fire. Week 3. Bring trade. These are time limited situations where you can only experience something if you're there. It's almost like a live show. It's almost like going to a show with a band. It's like, hey, we're having this event this time. Sea of Thieves is attempting to pioneer this idea, and they're kind of failing because they're not committing to it. If they were smart, they would have done this as free to play. In fact, I actually think that this game was built to be free to play, and somebody smart had this entire idea, and then Microsoft acquired them, didn't really get it, and they kind of met in the middle and sold it for a fixed price, but then kind of did all of this stuff anyway, since this is literally like half of the game. But I think Microsoft was weak. I think they should have held their chips when they actually put them down. I think Microsoft tried to go with the safe idea of like, oh, okay, well, what if we did, what if we still sold it like a normal game because that's successful, right? And like Microsoft isn't as innovative. Microsoft isn't as willing to take those risks. But that was the idea. That's what this is trying to pioneer. That's what they were going for. And I think Fallout 76 is the third attempt at this. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's maybe the same person. I don't think it's the same person. I don't think there is a single person that is pioneering, but I think these studios are picking up on this. I think No Man's Sky pioneered this idea and they failed at it. But some people looked at it and they were like, you know what? That's not a bad idea. That is not a bad idea because we're having a big problem right now where we sell a game for $30 and we're having trouble getting people to buy our future games for $30 because they already bought that one game for $30. You bought Battlefield 1. Why am I going to buy Battlefield 5? It's basically Battlefield 1. That's what people are saying. But what if you did this? Imagine if you did this, and I see this going this way. Imagine if Battlefield wasn't multiple games. Imagine if Battlefield was just one game. Maybe even free, possibly paid. But imagine if Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, don't call them that. Call them Battlefield. Screw it. You see this Sea of Thieves, Forsaken Shores? You would be like Battlefield World War I or Battlefield Trenches of whatever, Battlefield World War II. And imagine this. Imagine if you couldn't even play Battlefield 1 when Battlefield 1 is over. You can't even play it. Imagine, because that's the solution. Everybody's saying, oh, well, why am I going to buy Battlefield 5 if I have Battlefield 1? And EA is seeing this. Everybody is seeing this, and it's a genuine problem because they're saying, well, shit, they're right. We're not innovating. We can't do anything. We're not doing anything significantly better because everybody else is doing this. So what do? If there's saturation and your company is drowning because you don't have rarity anymore, your games aren't unique, then you can create rarity. You can engineer rarity. Make rarity a part of the product. Make rarity a part of the product. And I can see that happening to the Battlefield franchise. This isn't really even about the Battlefield franchise, but let me just put it this way. This new genre that I'm talking about, this new concept that I'm talking about, if EA were to subscribe to this, if Battlefield were to subscribe to this, which I actually think there's an excellent chance that it could happen, what would happen is you would create one brand. You would create Battlefield. And what you would do is you would create content that is limited. Oh, hey, play this one map for 2 months only, and then it is gone forever. Play this new theater for this time, and after that it's done, then it is gone forever. In fact, now that I think about it, Rainbow Six Siege Outbreak. Outbreak was a time-limited experience. In fact, I think this was also an experiment. I think this was Ubisoft's experiment. I think this was Ubisoft seeing this new idea and saying, oh shit, that could work. We should try that. And that's what this was. Outbreak was a limited time event in Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege introduced in the Operation Chimera expansion. It featured an exclusive collection of cosmetics available only during the time of the event. This is it. This is where it's going. This is the solution that the industry is discovering to combat the problems I have previously mentioned. And I think that Fallout 76 is Bethesda's entry into this. Rainbow Six Siege is becoming Ubisoft's. Ubisoft, I think Rainbow Six Siege wasn't really meant to be that from the beginning, but Ubisoft kind of released the game. They expected to support it over time, but then when they saw the success of that, they started experimenting with it more, and now they're seeing all of this other stuff, and they were like, oh my god, that's what this is. We can make Rainbow Six Siege this, and that's what they're doing. But I actually think that Rainbow Six Siege might suffer, because Rainbow Six Siege is still... It's not very culturally. In fact, I don't think Outbreak was received that well. Outbreak was their attempt. Oh, hey, let's do storyline. Let's do something engaging. But they don't realize that their entire audience is like a competitive audience. They're not. Rainbow Six Siege wasn't sold as that kind of an experience, and they're kind of trying to shoehorn that right now because they don't have a better way to do that. But this, and now Fallout 76. Here's what I think Fallout 76 is going to be. I think when Fallout 76 releases, it is going to be as barren as Sea of Thieves and as No Man's Sky. And I think it's going to get a lot of flack for it. And here's what's going to happen. It's going to get a lot of flack for it, and Bethesda's not going to say shit. They're not going to say a thing. They're going to do the exact same thing that Microsoft did. They're going to do the exact same thing that No Man's Sky did, and they're not going to say a thing. You want to know why? Because it wasn't a mistake. It's not like, oh, hey, thanks for your feedback. Now that we know that releasing a barren game isn't a good idea, we'll improve that in the future. That's not their play. That is not their play. This is intentional. They are creating a canvas. They are going to release a bare bones game. So specifically leaving people wanting more. That is the intention. That is the point. And yeah, maybe people will be disappointed, but here soon, I think people are going to start people are going to start accepting this. People are going to start being like, oh, well, that's what this is. Games are not made the way they were used to. They're not released the way that they used to be released. They're none of those things. Games are changing, and I think this is the way that games are changing. I think audiences are potentially going to change too as they become accustomed to this. Maybe not even as become accustomed to this. You know, as new people enter the market, younger people, it might get to the point where there's some younger people who play these games where this is just what games are to them now. This is what it's not as much of a game as much as it is an ongoing, almost like a show. It's a time limited experience. It's something that is evolving, that you participate in. It's not a product. It is a show. And I think that that's what Fallout 76 is going to be. It is going to be a bare bones game that comes out. It will get flack for that. It won't matter because Bethesda doesn't give a shit. That's not their play. And then what will happen is over time, there will be time limited events that you can participate in Fallout 76. Potentially, in fact, I would say almost definitely paired with some kind of in-game monetization system. I am actually, so for instance, this guy, MXR, I actually know this guy. We were both, I don't know if he's still with Machinima. We were both signed by Machinima. I've met him many times in the past. Holy Jesus Christ, he does do the Slooty content, doesn't he? Um, and he's a pretty successful Fallout mod. He covers mods. And here's the funny thing. In one of his recent videos, he's actually complaining about the idea that he wasn't invited to a event for the Fallout 76 premiere or whatever. Um, and his excuse, well, not excuse, it wasn't an excuse. His reason, because he obviously doesn't know entirely. Of course, Bethesda's not going to explain those kinds of things. But his excuse, or his rationale, I don't want to say excuse, that makes him sound bad. But his rationale was that it's because he covers sleuty or like risque content. I don't think that's it at all. I think that it's because he covers mods. And I think that Bethesda is starting to have a very complex relationship with mods. And I think that they don't really know what to do about it yet. That's why they were experimenting desperately with the Creation Club and paid modifications on the workshop, etc. Because they don't know how to deal with this whole mod situation. Because how the hell do you create time limited content? How the hell do you do this if you have modders basically undermining this by creating potentially just as good, if not better, content that's not time limited? I think that undermines the entire concept of this idea. And I think Fallout 76 knows this. Bethesda knows this. And that is not the concept of Fallout 76. I saw a lot of the people that went out to the Fallout 7. I know a lot of the people that went out. I was talking to them while they were going out. Um, I'm not jealous, nor did I want to go there because I've very specifically stopped going to those things on purpose. I've been to my share of parties. They were dope. They were interesting. It's not really. I've actually even noticed that as fun as they were, in a lot of ways they were actually detrimental and they distract me from. In fact, I think that's kind of what they're used as sometimes. They're kind of used as like a razzle dazzle attempt to distract YouTubers and stuff. And be like, oh, here's free alcohol and food and stuff like that. It was great, but it's not really something that I'm particularly. There's much more interesting experiences that I can go to, and I actually enjoy cracking a few brews open with my friends just as much as I like going to fancy crowded uh, parties. It's not as much my crowd, but anyways, getting back to the point, I think that Fallout 76 and mods for Fallout 76 potentially compromises this entire idea. And I don't think Bethesda has figured out exactly how to deal with that yet because all of these companies, they're limited by their adaptability. All of these companies are trying to adapt, but they have baggage. For instance, with Rainbow Six Siege, it was the fact that it wasn't originally sold as like a time limited cultural game with storylines. It's a competitive game. Like the people don't really care that much about time limited little things and skins. A lot of the fan base is just there for the competitive gameplay. And they don't really like PvE stuff as much as they like the competitive gameplay. Sea of Thieves' problem is they were bought by Microsoft, and Microsoft didn't have the balls to go through with this new plan. I think if Sea of Thieves was free to play, it would be competing with Fortnite right now. Honestly, I think that Sea of Thieves, if it was free to play, would be almost as big as Fortnite. Honestly, maybe not as big because the battle royale thing definitely hits hard, but it would definitely be significantly further along than it is now. And I think No Man's Sky. Where are you? I think No Man's Sky was the first even concept of this that was attempted, which is also why it flopped, which is also why, and this was part of the reason that I didn't understand because I was like, why isn't No Man's Sky apologizing? Why isn't No Man's Sky doing damage control? They're just taking this. They're not saying anything. It would be so easy to say, oh, okay, we understand the game is shallow. We're going to start putting work into that. But they didn't say anything. And you want to know why? I don't think it's because they're stupid or lazy or greedy. I think it's because this was the plan from the beginning. It was the plan to do this from the beginning, and they didn't know how people were going to react. They didn't know how it was going to go because it's the first attempt to do something like this at all. They're pioneering this whole new idea, but that's what the idea is. That's what No Man's Sky's objective was. And maybe they're not even doing it as well as future studios are going to do it, but that was the concept. Create something that has perpetual, ongoing, time limited content forever and run it almost like a TV show, but almost better. Because with a TV show, like if you were to try to make a TV show a time limited event, like, oh, you watch this now or you never see it again, people would pirate that. It would get out. You can't do that. It's physically impossible. But with games, especially with the technology that we have now, especially with games like Sea of Thieves, Fallout 76, No Man's Sky, where I guarantee you there is no offline option. You have to be connected to something all the time. You have to run through a launcher. You have to run through an updater. You can't crack this stuff because even if you did crack it, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to crack the version that has, like, if you were to crack Sea of Thieves, the content is changing and deleting itself every week. It is never a single full product ever. What are you going to do? Are you going to crack the version of it that was Forsaken Shores, or are you going to crack a different version of it? Like, it's going to be impossible to keep up with that. It's impossible, and they know that. And that's what Fallout 76 is. Fallout 76 will be bare bones. It will have time limited events. It will have long-term in-game monetization, and I think that they don't know how to deal with mods, and I think mods are potentially, unless they figure out a way to incorporate mods in a way that's meaningful, I think that they are going to try as hard as they can to sweep mods under the rug without pissing everybody off. Especially pissing off people like MXR Mods, which makes his entire living off of showcasing mods. Because that's the problem. We're at a point in the industry right now where if you were to get rid of mods, like, that's not just pissing off customers. That's potentially making powerful enemies, uprooting people's lives. What is MXR going to do if he doesn't have mods for Fallout 76? That is going to alienate a massive fan base, and they don't know what to do about that yet. They don't know what to do about that yet because mods also do not necessarily help Fallout 76 do what they're trying to get it to do, which is this. Now, I don't have a name for this. I don't have a name for this new kind of genre. I don't have a new name for this new kind of content, but this is what I'm seeing. This is where it's going. It's not an MMO. It's not even traditional multiplayer. It's a completely new concept that is like a cross between a TV show and a live band performance. And I actually think it's genius. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not even necessarily against it. I do feel slightly threatened by it because I think that this is an attempt to potentially stop communities like mine, potentially even stopping communities like MXR, where we make our livings off of building small indie content, potentially even mods for games. And I see this whole concept as an attempt to actually shut that down. I do feel slightly threatened by it, but at the same time, I do appreciate that this could be an effective solution to all of the problems that I mentioned in my previous video that I uploaded to my main channel. If you turn games not into a game, like if you start changing the way games are perceived, where it's no longer about creating a single product, but it's about creating a canvas, a platform that is an ongoing experience, that could actually be an effective solution. All right, well, that's it. I'm coming up to nearly an hour on this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is long. I hope I didn't take too long to get to the points. Hopefully you guys understand that this is kind of a complex and very strange topic that I am still myself mentally processing. So it's hard to like completely explain, but I hope that if you've listened to this, you understand. It's a very interesting concept. I'm very interested to see where it goes. I don't even understand where I necessarily fit into this. I don't know if influencers are going to become more important for this kind of content or less important or what. Or if maybe it's potentially an attempt to make influencers obsolete entirely because this is, but then again, you'd think, like, obviously, if it's a time limited event, that maybe even makes influencers even more important to get the amount of people you need there on time. It's interesting. It changes a lot of things. It potentially undermines the modding scene, but that may not be a bad thing since we have so many other things that are potentially bolstering the modding community. I don't know. It is very interesting, though. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed the podcast. I hopefully will have another video here for you soon and another update for you soon about YouTube giving my channel more features, um, about the internal podcasts and everything. So hopefully I'll let you know about that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, take care, and I love you, and I hope that this blew your mind a little. Hopefully it did. I hope it. I hope it. I hope that it didn't not. Okay. Cheers.